Hey, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody who's participating in this webinar. Yeah, we have Raymond Camden, who is going to present and give us an introduction to Here Studio, a simple and easy access, easy to use tool that you can use to build your map as part of the Hack for Better Days hackathon. Yeah, this specific tool will be used by the participants who are going for the stream number 2 of the hackathon. And yeah, I'm personally looking forward to seeing your maps when you submit them. Raymond, over to you. Looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you so much, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I have no idea where any of y'all are, but wherever you are, I hoping that you are having a wonderful day. Let me go ahead and increase my screen a little bit before we get started. I just got a comment that I should do that. All right, so welcome to building super maps with Here Studio. I'm going to be walking you through quite a bit of stuff. So the first thing that I want to do is start off with my contact information. And if you have any kind of feedback or any kind of questions at all about what I'm showing today, you could definitely contact me later. On Twitter, my DMs are open. My account is at Raymond Camden. So feel free to send me a message and I will do my best to give you a hand. You can also contact me via my blog, and I also hang out on our Slack, and I'll be sharing that particular URL towards the end of this presentation. All right, so let's kind of start with the basics. What is Here Studio? So it is a way to build maps, and with those maps, you'll be bringing in your data, and your data could be anything, whatever you do for your business or your organization or the contests, etc. It is a consumer solution, and I put that in uh, quotes on purpose because when I was first learning about our products, I've been with this company for about 10 months or so. I thought that Here Studio was not the solution for me because, I'm a hardcore developer. I don't need a simple no code type solution. But when I actually looked at Studio and I saw how much it could do and how easy it was to use, I definitely changed my mind about it being consumer only. So one of the things that I typically will do is start off with Studio no matter what, and only switch to some of the alternatives I'll tell you later if for some reason I can't do it within Studio itself. It works with something that we call Data Hub, and that's where your particular map data is going to be stored, and I'll show ways to work with that. And we also have a more developer type solution for times when Studio doesn't make the map exactly the way that you would like. Best part about this is that it's all free. And now, to be clear, I should say it has a free tier. If you're curious about the particulars, we have a very easy to understand pricing page that will tell you exactly what you get. And we also have multiple commercial tiers as well. So if you need something more than the free tier, then you could definitely upgrade to get more stuff. So when we talk about your data, the information that you'll be bringing to Here Studio, typically this will be information that includes location of some sort. So for example, I may have a list of cats, and that cat, every cat that I have in my list will have a location, and it may also have additional information as well. So the cats may have a gender, a breed, an age, and so forth. So that data will typically be in a couple particular formats, GeoJSON being, I think, the preferred one, regular JSON, CSV, etc. When working with Studio, just on the web page side itself, you do have a limit in terms of how much data you could send at once. The limit is 1 million features, which is quite a bit. To be clear, I'm not going to be showing 1 million features, but you can do that, and you can actually go beyond that. So if you use some of the developer options that I'll be talking about later, you could push up those larger sets of data. And you can also work with shape files as well. Now, I tend to prefer GeoJSON because it's pretty easy. It's a JSON format, so if you are a developer, then you're already aware that JSON is just simple text. That makes it pretty easy to work with. You can go to the GeoJSON website for more information, and if you're really, really bored, you can actually read the RFC. Now, I'm just kind of teasing about that. The RFC is actually pretty good in terms of giving you some particular details about it. A little bit more about GeoJSON. At the top level, it contains what's called a feature collection, which is essentially just a list of features. So I mentioned that I may have cat data. So I have a list of cats. The feature collection is all of my cats, and each individual cat with its location is going to be a feature. Now for GeoJSON, you have support for different ways of marking where something is. In my examples, I'll be using points, but you can definitely define a feature as being a polygon or a line or even multiple lines. And again, along with the location information, you also will have ad hoc properties. So my cats have a name and a breed. If your information is a list of cars, it may have a car type, how much gas, and so forth. This is a quick example of what GeoJSON looks. If you're not a developer, this may look like Greek to you a little bit, but it is plain text, so it's not too terribly hard to work with. I will say, when you look at coordinates in a GeoJSON file, it is longitude first, latitude second. Typically, I think you normally see latitude and longitude. GeoJSON does it a little bit different. If you actually want to test a GeoJSON file, there's a couple of good examples of how to do that. I tend to use Visual Studio Code, and there's an extension baked into it that will show you what your GeoJSON looks like on a map. And we here have a GeoJSON visualizer, which is an online tool to show where that stuff is. And I will, again, I know for the non-developers, this may be a little bit too much, but I'm going to show you what that map preview looks like with the GeoJSON file right here. And my data is real small, just 3 cats. And you can see I have a cat there, I have a cat in Baton Rouge, and a cat in New Orleans. If you are a Visual Studio Code user, this particular extension works really well. The only thing I'll point out is that if you edit your data, it doesn't update the map live. You'll have to close the preview and reopen it. But again, for the non-developers in there, I am probably boring the heck out of you. So let's talk about Here Studio. This is a 100% no coding solution most of the time. So what you're going to see me do, you're going to see me send data, upload data to Here Studio. It's possible that you have data that's not in the right format for Here Studio. And in that case, you may need to then write some code to reformat your data. So for example, you may have data in SQL Server. You don't have a file actually. So you could use something like Node.js, Python. You could use some type of development language to get that data from SQL Server, output a file, and then bring that to Here Studio. That's just an option. You can then add your own data to Here Studio. You'll create a project, you'll use your data, you'll add any kind of styles you want and share, and that's basically it. And I'm going to go ahead and open up Studio, and it should prompt me to log in. And again, this is free. You can register like so. And then I'm going to show you a quick demo. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with a very kind of lame example. I'm going to work with that list of 3 cats. It's a very small, very unrealistic data set. At the same time, though, it's not quite as overwhelming as a much larger data set. I'm going to show that as well, but I kind of wanted to start simple so it's not too overwhelming. So I'm gonna make a new project and I will call this April 24 live demo. I could optionally add a description. I'm doing this live, so don't screw it up. And save it like this. So Studio defaults to Europe. I want it a little bit closer to where I live. And by the way, actually, when I associate data with Peer Studio, it will actually figure out that, oh, your data is over here in America. It will move the map for me, but I kind of like to start on a familiar ground, if that makes sense. So what I want to do now is actually begin to add data. So I'm going to click on this plus data. And I'm going to go over here and do upload. And I have a lot of data already uploaded. Obviously, you know, I play and test with Studio all day long. So if I'd already uploaded the data that I wanted to use, I could just select it, but I'm going to pretend that I haven't. And I'm going to do browse files and go to my presentation. Give me 1 second here. And I have a file. I have both a CSV and a GeoJSON file. Here, Studio can definitely support CSV, but I'm going to use the GeoJSON that I just showed you. And it is right there. So it created a new data space for, and I'll talk a bit more about spaces later. It selected it for me automatically, and I'm going to hit Add One Data Set. And then Studio is going to re-render, and you can see it actually kind of zoomed in to show my data. It picked some default styles. It picked how to render it. If I click on one of my things, you can see it even presented a nice card-based view of that data. Now you'll see it's putting gender on top of name. That's not how I would organize things, but Studio can take in my data. It doesn't know what I consider to be more important in terms of what my properties are. Luckily, it's going to be really easy to fix this in a second. So I'm going to close this, and what I'm going to start off with is doing some basic styling changes. Now, again, what you're seeing here is just kind of a default style. I could definitely modify it. And what I want to point out is that I have the worst design skills across the entire planet. So I'm basically going to change things up. I'm probably not going to make it look very nice. You should absolutely blame me and not Studio. So we started off with circles. If I didn't like that, if I wanted a square instead, I could do that. And if I wanted an even more green, like that, and I could change my outline to black and do things like changing how thick it is and stuff like that. So you could definitely make this look what you think makes the most sense. I could also turn off the marker completely and switch to an icon instead. And we have a bunch of different icons. The pen is the default. And if I think that's a bit too small, I can make it much bigger and change the color. And again, I'm picking red, completely arbitrary. I can add a label and select what property. Again, my cats are pretty simple. They have names and genders, but I'll pick just the name. And then as you can see, by default, it's right on top. So if I put this at 20 for an offset, I could then see, there we go, there is Martha. So again, I can tweak this up. I can go crazy with it. What's really kind of cool, I mentioned that Studio is a non-coding type solution. I can do some pretty cool things with it. So for example, I can click on one of my cats, And what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at gender, and this little paint roller icon is actually going to allow me to create a new style. And what it's going to do is it's going to create a style based on a property. So I don't have to write any code here, but if I want to say I want my female cats to look different, all I had to do was click on that property and it filled this for me. And I could add additional properties if I had, slightly more complex conditions that I want to work on. But for now, I'll keep it simple. And I will say that my green circles will be the female, and you can see the red down here in New Orleans is my male cat. So again, pretty simple, not too complex, but I could build this more complex if I had more information in my data. Again, I wanted to start off a little bit easier for y'all and not overwhelm you with hundreds of data points and a lot of properties. I mentioned how the cards defaulted to making gender a bit more prominent. If I don't like that, I have an option right here on the left-hand side called cards, and I could actually modify by just dragging and drop. Now you'll see a little line here, and hopefully that's rendering well over the stream. If not, there is a very faint line here. I could actually move a property beneath it, and what will happen is that when you click, you'll only see one, but in the live map, you'll have a click for more link here where the user can then see those additional properties. So if I had something like, 20 properties, I could hide most of them from the default view and only show them when the user asks for it. I could also even completely hide a particular property by just clicking on that little eyeball icon to make it go away. So now if I click on here, I'll only see name and that's it. I bring gender back. Just a few more options. I can add an attribution. So data came from Ray and save it like that. And just kind of go to town and have fun with it. So once I have this map done, once I think it's styled nicely, and again, this is not the best color picks I've done here, but blame me, not Studio. If I want to start sharing this, I have a link right there at the bottom, publish. I toggle it on, and then I have a link that I can start sharing. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy, and I'm going to paste this in a new tab. And in theory, if you have really good eyes, those of you who are watching this, you could copy this URL and you can see what I'm seeing here. Now I could go ahead and do some tweaking. I'm going to go ahead and say continue editing, open up the little settings toggle here, and I could start tweaking stuff as well. So if I don't want my legend, because in this case the legend does tell you that the greens are female, but if I don't want that, I can just get rid of that. As soon as I click that and reload, it should go away. There we go. And if I wanted to add my description, I could turn that on. So, and you do get a nice preview over here, which is good. It's a static preview, so I can't drag. But again, I can go to my other tab. I can reload and so forth. So again, pretty darn easy. I want to show one more thing that I didn't tweak before. You can change the default map. Let me zoom out a little bit here. I like this look. I like the dark UI in general, but I could definitely switch to others. This is a very bright blue. I think it's a little bit too bright. You have a spring bright and even a satellite view. And you could see how green Louisiana is. This is where I live, by the way. If you want to come visit, come say hi after everything is better. So yeah, and then as soon as I do that, again, this is kind of automatic. So anyone using the map will see the update. And I just shared the URL. There is also a iframe embed. So if you have an existing web page with your navigation and stuff like that, then you could definitely put it within your site UI and just use the iframe instead. So that was kind of, a simple demo. I actually have a lot more data, and I want to show how well Studio works with that. So I'm going to make a new project. I'm going to call this one NPS April 24. And again, just to make it easier for me. And I'm going to say plus data, and I am going to upload a different GeoJSON file. And this one is going to be called National Park Studio. And what this is in America, we have a national park system. It's essentially how we organize all our national parks. And the NPS, the National Park System, they share a lot of data. So they share the locations of all their maps, of all their parks, and they share a good deal of data about each particular park. So I've uploaded that data and it's selected. I'm going to do add one data set. And you could see, boom, a lot of data. And like I keep forgetting, America has territories out there. I believe this is the U.S. Virgin Islands. But essentially, this is every single national park out there. Again, Studio just did some default coloring. If I click on one, the card information, again, is just kind of going by default. You can see I have a lot of properties over here, way too much, but we're going to tweak that and make that a little bit better. So one of the first things that I want to do is I want to change my point style to instead be an icon, because we have an icon for parks, and it is nature. And because nature typically is a green thing, we'll make it like that. And I want my icons to be a little bit bigger. That's a little bit too big. I'll make it 15, like that. So now I could see my data a little bit better. And again, I have data everywhere. If I wanted to like search for something, so let's say New Orleans, I could search here and Studio knows where New Orleans is, of course. And I could see I do have a park in there. And I definitely want to go into my cards and make them a little bit nicer. So again, I have all of these properties. I probably want to have the full name show by default and not activities. I can keep description in, and I'm going to do something else. I'm going to add image here, and I'm going to leave that as is. I think 3 properties is probably enough. And again, I could turn some of these off. Like, so park code, for example, is something internal that NPS uses to associate a park with its own database. And most people probably won't care about that. I will put weather info a bit towards the top. So if I put this away and then click, let me zoom out a little bit. I'm going to show you a pretty darn cool feature. So when Studio sees a property that is a URL, it's actually going to render it automatically. So now I have on my card, I have a picture from the park. Now, again, this is data that I provided, but again, Studio was able to recognize that, hey, that's an image, I can render it. And as I pick different ones, it will load images as well. And that looks like a lovely beach. That'd be nice to visit. So that is definitely a much more complex one. Gonna leave that as is. I could tweak this a bit more, but again, if I want to share this and click view map, and if those of you who are in the room, if you could copy that URL, you could actually have this map now to play with. You probably can't see the URL, so just send me a DM if you want it. I'll also say that GeoJSON file that I used to upload, that was all public data. And if you want a copy of that, just hit me up and I will share it with you. All right, so back to the slide deck. So that was the walkthrough. We just did it, but I gotta have the cat picture on for at least a second now. So that was the easy aspect, and Studio can do a heck of a lot for you and may be all you need, but there may be a time when you need to do a bit more. So for example, you want to use Studio, but perhaps your data isn't at all in a format that would be nice to use with it. you may like Studio, but perhaps you need a bit more options. So, you want to do something weird with the styling that we don't support out of the box. You may also have map data, but you don't want to build a map and you still want to use our services to store our information. But you want to build something like an A word. And I'm saying the A word because I have multiple A word devices around me right now, and I don't want them to all wake up and start talking to me. But you may have just more that you want to do. The good news is that, as soon as you start using Studio, as soon as you start creating that data, you're also using a complementary product that we call Data Hub. Data Hub is where all of your data for Studio lives, and it allows you to use that data in other ways. So again, maybe you don't want to build a map. You want to use the voice assistant type interface instead. Data Hub would allow you to do that. This consists of a couple parts, including a CLI and REST APIs, and you can find more information on this homepage. I will find some way to share this slide deck with y'all, not live, but I can make a PDF later to share with everyone in the room today. Now, there are some terms that Studio kind of hides from you that you kind of do need to know when working with the data more directly. A space is simply a bucket for your information. So if you're a developer, you can think of it like a database. When I uploaded the National Park System data, it got placed into a particular space. Features, we already talked a bit about in terms of GeoJSON, but essentially everything on my map is a feature. So when I had those 3 cats, that was 3 features. When I had my 300 plus parks, they were all particular features. And the last thing that you'll have to think about as well, possibly, is tags, and I'll talk a bit more about tags in a bit. So, and to be clear as well, you don't think that you have to have a PhD in computer science to use what I'm showing here. Especially the CLI could definitely be used by people who may not consider themselves developers. I will be on a soapbox for 10 seconds here, but I hate it when people say, oh, I can't write this program because I'm not a capital P programmer. Anyone can write code, anyone can be a developer, doesn't matter what your background is. My degree is in English, for example. So don't just kind of tune this out if you don't have a computer science degree. The CLI requires Node.js, but you do not have to know what Node is. The link that I'm going to share towards the end will actually tell you how to install Node if you've never done it. And then after you've done it, you can just forget that you have it on your system. Once you have that, you'll run a command line to install the CLI. And then after that, you'll do a one-time configuration to basically associate the CLI with your particular here.com login account. Once you have the CLI done, in terms of the features that it can do, it can work with spaces. So when you saw me in Studio upload a file and that made a space, that was creating a space. The CLI can do the same thing, and it can also read from that data, update that data, and delete it as well. It will also it'll be how you can work with tags, and again, I'm going to talk about tags a bit later. And also gives you a way to just look at your data. So you want to quickly see how many features are in a space or get an idea of the type of data that's in there. The CLI also supports basic data transformation features as well. So I can work with a CSV file and say, hey, in my CSV file, this particular column represents my longitude and this one represents my latitude. This is also how you will upload shape files. I will be honest and say I have yet to work with shape files, but I know they're pretty common. So if you want to do that, you have to use the CLI instead of the website. This is also how you will handle really large files. So again, Studio via the web interface can handle 1 million total. I would say, if you have 100,000 or more, I would probably use the CLI anyway, because it could stream that data in a much more efficient way than possibly the browser can do that. So I'm going to show you some quick demos of working with the CLI. Let me get my terminal open real quick. All right, and get my proper terminal. Got to have the cat. All right, so let me get into my All right, and again, don't be too worried if this is a bit quick and a bit overwhelming. Once you have the here CLI installed, you could always do here.h, -h to get interactive help, like so. And so what I'm going to do first is basically just ask the system what spaces I have created already. Now, again, I play with this all day long, so there's going to be a bunch, so let me make my screen a bit bigger. And there we go, and we could see the IDs, the titles, and descriptions. Now, ID is pretty important because as we work with the space and make changes and stuff like that, we're going to need that particular space. But I'm going to show you how to create one real quick. And I'm going to call it the title. I'm going to call it April 24 live test and give it a description. Don't screw up, Ray. Like so. Now at this point, all I've done is actually created a space, a empty database. So if I go in here and that did not work, but that's okay. I'm going to copy that in a second. If I want to upload to it, I can do here XYZ upload, and I'm going to type this in, and I'm not going to screw it up like that. And then all I have to do then is give it a file name. And I had the cats one, it was cats.geojson. Now, one nice thing the CLI does, it always prompts you to consider using the -s option to stream. Because I knew I had 3 features, I wasn't too worried about it. Pardon me 1 second while I take a sip of coffee. But at this point now, I have created a space and I have uploaded data to it. So I actually have something right now that I can use in Studio. So again, if you're not a developer, but you have that 2 million size file of data that somebody gave to you, I absolutely think that you can manage getting the CLI installed and doing those 2 commands. And at this point, you could stop using it completely, switch back to Studio, and work with your data there. I'm just going to give you a quick tour of a few other features. You can, let me try to copy this one more time. Sweet, that worked. We have a show command, which will basically kind of dump out the data for you. It'll try its best to format it nicely. And you can see here, I have 3 cats. I also have an analyze one, which will look at your data and prompt you to tell it how you want to examine it. So I'm going to select gender, and you can see the CLI looked at my existing data and gave me essentially some sample values, but I'm telling it to analyze my data by gender, and I could see a report sorted by the gender value that was highest, in this case female, and then male, and then a total number of unique values. So again, my cat file is pretty simple, so it's not going to be that crazy. So that is the CLI, and to be clear, it does a lot more. I'm just kind of keeping it a little bit simple here, not go too crazy for the non-developers in the room. I mentioned tagging. Tagging is basically how we could do simple grouping and filtering as well. And each feature can have multiple tags associated to it. And you can return, or you can ask the system to say, hey, for this tag, tell me the features that were assigned to it. So I have a super simple example here. And what I am going to do is quickly look at my existing spaces. I'm going to make a new one for the National Park System, and I'll call it April 24 tag test. I don't need to give it a description. And I'm going to copy that ID like so. And then what I'm going to do is upload XYZ upload -F and National Park System. And I'll explain this in 1 second. So what I am going to do, treatment. All right. Okay. Sorry, I'm letting the coffee cut in, kick in a little bit. So all I'm doing here is I'm saying I want to upload data into my new space. I have that national park system data, which, 300 plus national parks across America. And I'm telling the CLI, I say, I want you to go ahead and I want you to create tags automatically based on a treatment, and that's not the one, designation. So every park has a designation. So some are like a national observatory, arboretum, etc. Basically the type of park it is. And I'm also specifying the space I just made. And in theory, if I didn't screw this up, as I type live, it's going to upload. This one goes a little bit slower because it's 300 plus, and we can see exactly 396. I did not use the streaming option. It would have been even quicker, but I'm totally fine with 3 seconds. And what it did is it gave me a report, and this is essentially how it tagged my data for me automatically. So for example, there's a difference between a national park, a national historical park, a recreational area, battlefield, and seashore. And what's nice is that as soon as I have that, I can then ask Data Hub. I want to say, I want you to show me all my features that have a tag of designation national river, like so. And I should get 2 of them. And this is the default report. I could actually ask it to return a particular property. In this case, I know that parks have names. So now when I get it back, it is returning the 2 parks that are designated as a national river. Not quite sure what a national river is, but now I know the 2 parks that have them. So that's tagging, and tagging works, well when you have an organizational type setup. We also support something a bit more complex in terms of being able to actually search features. So this definitely gives you more freedom than doing basic tagging. You can do equality checks. You could do less than or greater than. One of the things I don't have in my parks is like how big they are. But if I did, I could say, hey, Data Hub, tell me the parks that are bigger than like 500 acres, for example. You can do and style searching, so parks that are bigger than so-and-so and that are currently open. I could also pass multiple different properties, multiple different values, and essentially, create a pretty complex result. I could also filter what I get back to just the properties that I care about. So essentially, a lot of power. I will say this is on by default, but if you want to modify what is searchable, that comes into the paid tier, and I'll be talking about that in a few minutes. But by default, though, all of my data is just going to be ready to be searched. Again, this is a fairly complex topic. We do have docs on it. I'm going to show one very, very quick demo of that. And actually, this is not even particularly, yeah, I'm gonna show this real quick, sorry. So I pass in my ID, and what I'm gonna do via the CLI is do search, and I'm gonna ask for a park code, that's FRLA. So this is gonna search against that particular property, that particular value. And again, I'm just doing a basic equality type search. I could do a much more complex search. So this should return one particular park, and it did like so. By the way, something else that you could do with the CLI, you could do things like spatial searches. So based on a location, tell me the things that are nearby. So if I did that for my location, and I would love to say that I've memorized my lat long, but I have not. So I'm definitely looking at something while I type this. I'm gonna do a radius of 300,000 meters, which as an American, that sounded huge. Like I thought maybe the whole country is 300,000 meters. And then I looked it up and it's like 180 miles. So it's not it's not quite as big as I thought. So this should basically say, you know, based on my location, find the parks that are within 186 miles of me. And that's something else that you could do with our CLI. So I showed a demo of that. The next part that I want to talk about is our REST-based API, and this is going to be pretty quick. Basically, it's everything that I showed you in the CLI, kind of doing it by hand. I could also do via REST APIs, as well as doing certainly a bit more complex type operations. It uses a token-based security system. I'm not going to show that right now, but we provide both via the CLI and the UI a way to create tokens. And tokens that can do things like I have the ability to read from my space, or I have the ability to update my space. And what's nice about that is that if you're building something with JavaScript, for example, on the client side, you can create a read-only token that is completely safe for client-side code. And you'll actually see an example of that in a second, that's safe to use on the web. Now, if you are a Node developer, this will make sense to you. I just want to show an incredibly simple example of how you would read features. And basically, it's one API call against a root URL, a particular space ID, and I've kept this vague for now, and then literally that's it. For the security, I pass an authorization header and so forth. So this is essentially, you know, reading from a space. The REST APIs support everything that I've showed today. So adding features, updating features, and so forth. So the last thing that I want to show you, like the last example of something that you may want to do would be creating customized maps. So we have a JavaScript maps library that essentially allows you to do essentially anything. So you want to customize a look and the feel, you want different interactivity, you want markers that look different. You saw me in here studio, those markers, I had a choice of about 10 or so different icons. You can definitely supply custom icons as well if you use our mapping library. And basically, you know, if you want to do something crazy, something completely custom, this is how you would do it. So the basics would be, you know, you go into a web page and you would start off by adding JavaScript and CSS. And by the way, this is definitely all documented, so don't worry about copying anything down, but you'll copy and paste a couple lines of code. After that, you're going to add a map object. And again, this is kind of showing you how simple it is. So in this case, I have a map object that is centered on my home, basically. I have a particular item in my DOM, in this case, a map container where the map will be rendered. And I do things like add pinch and zoom controls and add the zoom in and out, stuff like that. Last thing you do is essentially add Data Hub. And all then I have to do then is get my space ID, get my token, and literally that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you know, 5 or 6 lines of code then to add that into my site. So I have a demo of this, and let me actually go to my notes. I was supposed to open this earlier. I apologize. Open up. So this is that national park system. This is a custom map. I did no interactivity on this, so there's no cards or anything, but I could absolutely do whatever I wanted to in here. And if I wanted more web controls over here to like maybe you click and something over here shows up instead, you know, basically whatever I want to do to do with my Data Hub data, the mapping library makes it super easy to work with. And then we have the REST-based APIs, and you know, essentially, you know, Studio could probably solve almost all of your problems. And when it doesn't, we absolutely have options for you to work outside of that as well. So I did mention that there was a like a commercial tier above the free tier. We call this the add-on set. This is detailed back in the pricing tier link I mentioned earlier. It will do things like give you, more data, better control over search. You can even do crazy things like virtual spaces where you could take multiple spaces and kind of mosh them together. Hex bins is another cool feature where if I realize that I have a lot of data and want to make it a bit easier to look at, a hex bin will create like a summary version. I'll try this live, and it should work. Yeah, let me turn it on real quick and zoom out. So what this did was basically kind of create like a summary version where it said, I have a lot of data, I'm gonna condense it into one bucket. And this little red hex bin here is basically saying I have a lot of data there. And as I zoom in, you see it breaks apart a bit. So again, that's a higher tier version. We can also do things like help you validate your data before it comes in, give you an activity log. So if you're constantly changing your data, we can give you a way to look at that. And one really, really cool feature is rules-based tagging. So I created a tag for my parks based on their designation, but we can do things that are a bit more dynamic. So I mentioned, it could be possible to have the size of a park, maybe the number of acres. We could actually create a dynamic rule where any park that's over 1,000 acres is tagged as a big park, and anyone that's below that is tagged as a small park. And we have great tutorials that actually walk through a lot of the features on this slide that you could play with and kind of see how it's done. So wrapping up, there's links here. Again, I will share this slide deck. I don't have the PDF ready this second, but I will definitely share it with you. If you start at the main site, it's going to be developer.heater.com/product/platform.studio. If you forget, just go to developer.heater.com and you can see Studio under the Products tab. We have a blog, again, developer.heater.com/blog, where we have a lot of posts about all kind of different features, definitely more than just Studio. But if you want to be inspired about what you can create with some of our stuff, you can start there. And we have a Slack that we definitely participate in. And I'm going to wrap it with that. And I don't know if, don't think I have any questions. So I will kind of repeat what I said earlier, and that if you have anything, you could definitely reach me on Twitter. And my email address is also raymondcamden@gmail.com, raymond.camden@heater.com. You have multiple ways that you can reach out to me, and I like your questions. So please let me know. And I think I'm going to wrap it with that.
Thank you very much, Raymond. Is it all right that if I can ask a few questions here?
Absolutely. You can.
Yeah, my other participants can have these questions in mind as well. So my first question is, can people show like line or polygon features on our maps?
Absolutely. So I will repeat the question because that's what I typically do on stage. He asked if we could do non-point type stuff, so lines or polygons. Absolutely. You can actually edit data live in Studio. I would do that while y'all are watching, but I'll probably screw it up. But your data can definitely contain polygons, a line, multiple lines, multiple polygons, and Studio has no problem with that at all.
Okay, sounds great. My second question is, can people create like map features using the Here Studio, or they have to just import data like from shapefiles or CSV or GeoJSON? Is there a way that they can go to the Here Studio and start creating points and adding attributes and stuff to it. Like some of the data that they want to use probably they're in their heads. Like they know that there's this grocery shops that provide this sort of um, um, essential goods, and so I want to pinpoint it on the map for my community to be aware of it. So is there any way that they can build a map from scratch by just clicking and creating these features rather than just getting the data from other sources?
Yeah, so you can definitely add data. So I'm looking at my cat map, and I realize I actually have a green background with green dots. So let me make that a little bit more obvious. So when I select my cats, I get a little pencil up here, and this toggles edit mode where I can begin adding information. You had asked about lines and polygons, so you can definitely do that. And I'm just drawing a polygon here. And so now I've added a new feature to my map. And if I save that, and I know I did this right. I've only used this feature a couple times. Let me see, make sure I did it right because I'm live. Yes, you can. I am screwing up live because I'm probably a little bit nervous. Let me try that one more time and click save. And this feature has no properties yet, so it is there. Yes, you can. I'm definitely doing something wrong because typically I rarely edit on Studio. I'll edit locally. Well, you'll watch me. Let's actually do this live. New cat and mail another new cat. So you definitely can. I am potentially doing this. Oh, there we go. Okay. There's a new cat. There's the polygon data as well. So yes, you can. I would say like if you're planning on doing a lot of editing, I'd probably do it locally just because you may have a better editor for that. But certainly for doing modifications, adding some new rows, you definitely can.
Right. Thanks for that. That was definitely useful. Sorry, I have a lot of questions, but the other one is, are there like guides or references that as users we can use to install the CLI, the here CLI, or the instructions that how we can use that command line interface?
Absolutely. Like I said, I have all the links in my slide deck. I know we don't have a formal way to share files on here, but if you go to developer.here.com, I'm on the studio page. We have a link to the Data Hub CLI, and that takes you to our docs. And that will tell you how to install Node.js if you don't have it, and how to install the CLI as well. So yes, we have docs.
Yeah, okay, that's handy because I personally was a bit confused because you directly jumped into it, and with people with less experience with the command line interfaces, I might need to have access to the to some sort of a documentation or reference. So this is the place that people can use this information. Yeah, it's good to know. Yeah, that was pretty much my question. Is
Cool.
there anybody from the participants have any other questions? You can unmute yourself and ask your question. Just okay. There are a number of questions actually.
Okay. Now I can't
Yeah.
see. Can you handle reading them to me?
Yes, for sure.
Cool.
Someone says I miss my cats, and that's Melody.
Oh, I shouldn't laugh at
Okay.
that. Yeah, I would miss my kids too.
All right, Tommy from Indonesia, Raymond, he's asking, what does a feature mean?
So a
Is it
feature is based.
rows? But it seems like an attribute now. 1 million attributes or rows?
So one feature is basically one thing on your map. So that could be one point on your map. It could be one polygon. So looking at this map here, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 features. So the feature contains both the location, whether it's an exact point or whether it's a polygon or a line, and it contains custom data. And that custom data will be that's something that you provide. So in my example here, it's a name and gender, but the feature is both of those things together.
Right. Right. I played around with the studio a little bit, but to my understanding, in a simple way, there are layers that have some sort of attribute, like whether they're points or a line or a polygon. And when you added that polygon, it automatically created a polygon layer. So to my understanding, there's a different levels of hierarchy. So you have layers as point layers or polygon layers, and then within those layers you have these features, which, if I'm not mistaken, Tommy, those are the rows that you mentioned in those layers. So that's how I classify them in my own head.
Yeah, I mean, I see. I don't like to say layers because I think of Photoshop and I think of like how high they
Yeah.
are. That makes it visible versus invisible. Whereas you can see here, my polygon and that point above it, they're both definitely visible. I view this as basically my list of styles grouped by what they're styling. So this is styling points and this is styling polygons.
Right. Okay. So I hope Tommy got his answer.
Hmm.
Yeah, the next question, again, Tommy asked, what is the advantage of lat long compare, he's referring to the order, longitude and like goes first and latitude goes second compared to latitude being first and longitude afterwards.
I don't think there's any advantage at all. It just depends on the particular service that you're using. So for GeoJSON, its specification is long, comma, lat. I think generally most people write it lat, comma, long, but that's something I don't worry about. If I have both values and I'm writing code, for example, to work with one of our APIs, I look at our docs, I see what it asks for, and I pass it in that particular format. If I'm writing GeoJSON by hand, then I would just do that. I would write long, comma, lat because I've making a note for myself that that's the format it uses. So it's not an advantage per se. It's the person consuming your data, it's telling you what it wants and you do what it wants, basically.
Right. And Tommy has another thing that he is interested to see the data he uploaded. I mean, Raymond uploaded. Is it the JSON data that people saw earlier?
So if I understand what he's asking, you want to look at the data. So you can do that. You go in the data, the little hamburger menu at the end, you could do download, and it's not quite the same as I uploaded. Actually, that's a huge file. Let me do a smaller file. No, go back. 1 second. Let me do a smaller one so we can actually look at it. This is the cats one. So come on down and open. And why are you not doing Visual Studio Code? That's all right. And we'll use Notepad. So it's essentially the same. So my cat has a name and a gender. Color is something that I was playing with earlier. But Data Hub does add a custom property. And we do document this, by the way. But in this case, it automatically added a tag based on the file name, as well as some metadata about when the feature was created and updated. So essentially, the data that you give us, we do enhance it a little bit. We also add a internal ID like that. But outside of that, the data is going to be essentially the same. And hopefully that answers his question.
Yep, I hope Tommy got his answer. All right, Melody is asking if she can make an icon for the cats.
So right now you can't change. Let me get back to it. You can't change. You can't specify a custom icon. You are limited to. I'm getting there. I'm getting there. Where is it? No, I'm looking right. There we go. You're limited to the 10 or so that we have here. But again, if you're comfortable working with JavaScript or working with somebody who's comfortable working with JavaScript, if you use our maps.js library, you can use any icon you want. You could definitely do a cat icon. And heck, you could do an icon based on the gender. So a red icon for boys, a blue icon for gender, girl, cats, etc. You can get as custom as you would like.
Right. That would make that visualization very exciting. Good question, Melody. Again, Tommy's asking, is Hexbin like clustering in Gmap? I assume that he's referring to Google Map.
I've not used that feature in Google Maps, but yes, it is clustering. So if I go back to the one I did on screen quickly, not that one. I believe it was this. And let me enable hex bins. Yeah, so you see a lot of data here in, where is that, Washington. When I enable my hex bin, you see it essentially clusters it a bit. And as I scroll back, I could see it. And so this provides, when you're working with a lot of data, this provides kind of a nicer view of that and not quite as overwhelming. Towards the end of my slide deck, I mentioned 2 tutorials. We have a great tutorial that walks you through how to do that via the CLI. You can see over here, it was essentially one toggle. This is on that add-on tier. I mentioned the pricing. Our pricing page, which is right here, and that is part of the add-on level that is paid. And you're seeing the American price here because I'm signed in. If you're in Australia or Asia, obviously the price would be different. And by the way, Tommy, thank you for all those questions. It's awesome.
Yeah, really, really good questions. Now we have a question from, actually a few questions from Santi. They're asking, do you have any suggestions on where to find data? Well, I guess like it depends on what sort of data they're after.
Yeah, it depends. So I knew that the national park system had data, so I Googled, like months and months ago, national park system GeoJSON. So if you're looking for cat data or whatever, I would just Google for cat GeoJSON or cat geographic data. Again, it just depends on what you're looking for. I'm not aware of like a resource that is just location data and you type in a list, but what I'm going to do is, because that's a great question, to note to myself, is there a resource of links for location for X?
Yeah, Santi, I'm not sure where you're located in, but if you can ask that question on Slack from me, I would potentially be able to point you to the right direction. Yeah, I'm happy to help you. All right, Octavian, he's asking, it would be nice if you can share the data and map for national parks. Thank you.
Yeah, that was Octavian, I think.
Yes.
It's actually, so you can DM me on Twitter. It is also on my GitHub repository, and this probably a little bit hard to see, but CF Jedi Master / here demos. I have a folder called MISC related, and I have a National Parks Studio.geo.json. And basically, National Parks GeoJSON, that's the file that they provided. I wrote some code that used their API to get more data, like description and stuff like that. I thought I had closed WebEx. And then I created a GeoJSON file from that. I called it National Parks Full. And then I reformatted it a bit to be a bit nicer with Studio. So you have a couple of options here for the data.
Yeah, great. Octavian, I'm recording this session and I will make it available on the YouTube channel of the hackathon. And you can go to the YouTube channel in the Slack channel, YouTube's Slack channel, and access this video, and you can pause it and grab that URL from the top. Hopefully that helps. Santi has another question that is there a way to customize the base map?
No, so you can, let me get back to it. You can modify how it looks, but you can't do things like, I want this gray to be more black, for example. So again, if you want to do something like that, you can switch to the JavaScript, you can switch to the JavaScript library and tweak the styles as much as you want. And I could say, so I'm pretty good with JavaScript, and because I said that, I'll make big mistakes today. But the interface for working with the library is not hard at all. I have, it's not very pretty, but on my here demos repository, I have a bunch of small demos that show, you know, doing this with the library, doing that with the library. Not terribly well documented, but they'll give you some sample code. And if you go to our maps product page and then go to the documentation, we have a bunch of examples over here. Like, look at that. That's an enormous amount of examples with all the code and so forth.
And if I'm not mistaken, Raymond, one of them is an example of customizing the map.
Yeah, let me, this is one of those things where because I'm broadcasting and I'm live, I won't see what's right in front of me. Right. Style, changing map style at runtime. That's an example. And yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Cool. Oh, animated markers. I did not know we had that. Oh, wow. That's okay. Sorry, distracted. That's pretty cool though.
Okay, moving on to the next question. Jessica is asking how far we can zoom the map. For example, could we make a map focused on a specific national park?
Yeah, so a couple answers to that. When you share the map, let me find the option. You can specify an initial map location. So if I wanted to zoom in on Louisiana, for example, we'll zoom in close to my home. I could make a bookmark for this. I'll call it my home, like so. And when I publish this, I could actually say, focus in on my home. And now if somebody goes to that map, they will be focused on that. And again, obviously, if you're using the JavaScript map library, you can make this totally dynamic. So you could actually use geolocation on the browser. And for people in Europe, you could focus them on Europe, people in Australia, you know, et cetera.
Okay, cool. Sushant, sorry if I'm uh, mispronouncing your name, Sushant. He's from India and he's asking whether it's possible to develop hexagonal mapping of location data based on a particular feature, such as category. Raymond, can you understand the question?
Uh, I don't know if I understand. I mean, I
Yeah,
can't.
'cause I'm having difficulty understanding
Yeah.
it.
So remember, we support tagging of features. We support searching for features. So you can do things like search for all the features. So for all the cats that are female and draw a polygon around that. You couldn't do that in Studio, but with our JavaScript maps library, you could do that. So if he's saying, based on data, like circle around or polygon around features, um, that should be possible. And if he or she wants to hit me up directly with more detail, I would definitely be willing to work with them.
Yeah,
Right.
hi. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll give you like something that I'm working on at the moment. So I have the location complaint data of multiple states in India, right? Of a particular state, and what I want to do is that I want to create a hexagonal map where I can identify regions which have a relatively higher number of complaints compared to other regions. And since the boundary is not exactly uniform, so that's why I want to create, let's just say, equal sized hexagons, which based on the severity of the number of complaints, let's just say if a complaint, there are 10 complaints in a hexagon, then it's dark red color. But if there are 0 complaints in one hexagon, it's very light red color or white color. So this is something that I wanted to develop a hexagonal map for my complaint data. So is something like this possible?
So when you say hexagonal map, are you like talking about what I did with the hex bins, or so like my hex bin map, the hex
Yes.
bins? Oh, so then yes. If so, then yes. You can customize how it organizes the hex bin, either by count or by some other property. I don't know how to do that, but I know our tutorial, I believe, goes into detail on that. And again, um, if you hit me up directly, I will share that link with you. I can share it now, but you would have to type it in, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Would you be able to share it with me so I can also give it to other participants?
Absolutely. And
Yeah, that would
while
be
you read
great.
questions to me, I'm going to try to do it live.
Sure. Yeah, I'm just trying to manage this GoToWebinar. The last three questions slash items, they're quite related to each other. Emma, she is from Oren. We've worked with each other in the past. She indicated Oren as one of the data sources, but Oren is only, they offer only data for Australia, and that's why earlier I mentioned that, like, if I can understand the location of the person, and then I'll be able to help. But thanks, Emma, for raising that. But at the same time, Emma is asking, can Here Studio plug the Oren API straight into the studio? Can we do that? And Venkatapa, yeah, sorry for my mispronunciation, is also asking if we can import the data using API links. Raymond, does here Studio or Data Hub allows integration with data APIs that other companies or organizations offer?
As long as you're comfortable creating that connection using code to talk to our APIs, you can definitely write code that reads from somebody else's API, gets the data, and then sends it to our APIs. So you can absolutely do it that way. And if you're looking for like a click and convert type thing, then no. But we do have the tools there where you could do it manually, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so they basically need to write code for an adapter to convert that API output into the inputs that here Studio would understand.
Yep.
Okay, and I think that is the end of all the questions.
Okay.
Thank you very much from all of you for asking all these amazing questions, and thanks, Raymond, for answering them very patiently. Really appreciate it.
No
So
problem.
if there's no other questions or comments, we can wrap up this webinar and thank Raymond collectively for
Welcome.
this amazing content that he put together. And hopefully this will help the participants to use this information to build maps as part of the Stream 2 challenge in the Hack for Better Days hackathon. Thank you, Raymond, and thank you all for participating.